Today we're going to talk about an introduction to ecology. Let's learn about what ecology is and kind of the organization of an ecosystem, a biosphere. The web of life. How are living things connected? Organisms need energy and matter for life. An organism is a living thing. You're an organism. A bug is an organism. A fern is an organism. That's a type of plant. Anything that's alive is an organism. Interactions between organisms allow the exchange of energy and matter. So that means there has to be some kind of exchange going on for energy and matter to go back and forth. So, for example, if you have a salad for lunch, or if you had a salad for lunch, you ate a plant. And so you get some of the energy that plant had when it was growing. And so there's an exchange of energy and matter. Ecology is the study of how organisms interact with one another and with their environment. So we're looking at how living things get along, interact with each other and their environment. Biodiversity is the variation of living organisms. So bio means life and diversity means variation. So we've got the variation of living things. Organisms are connected to all other organisms because each individual has a role to play in the flow of energy and matter. What that means is everything is connected because each thing must rely on something else, even if we trace it all the way back to the sun, for its energy, for its matter, for its life. A biotic factor, such as an organism and how it interacts with a living thing, is part of the environment. So remember, a biotic factor is a living part of the environment. All organisms do rely on the non-living environment for survival. Abiotic factors, or non-living parts of the environment, include things like water, nutrients, soil, sunlight, rainfall, temperature. All of those are very important for living things to survive, and each of those are non-living factors. Abiotic factors determine where organisms can survive. So obviously, if something takes a high temperature, that's an abiotic factor, then a living thing cannot survive in an environment like Indiana in the winter. Stay organized. What are all the levels of organization in the environment? The environment can be organized into different levels that range from a single organism to all of the organisms in an area. So I will try to take you through each of the levels and let you know when each vocab word is just a vocab word or when it's a level in the environment. An individual is the smallest level of the organization. So this is the very bottom level, individual. This is a level of organization in the environment. Individual, smallest level. One thing, one living thing. Now this is the second level of organization. So a group of individuals make up a population, but those individuals have to be of the same species. Now what is a species? A species includes organisms that are closely related and can mate to produce fertile offspring. So why that's important is if you can't produce fertile offspring, then you can't continue your species. There must be a fatal flaw in the genetics somewhere. So for example, if a horse and a donkey mate, they produce a non-fertile or an infertile offspring called a mule. So mules cannot pass on their genes, they cannot have babies, they cannot create offspring. So a species is organisms that are close enough related that they can mate and produce fertile offspring. Individuals within a population often compete with each other for food, shelter, and mates. So think of a population. So we start at one, an individual. So let's say one squirrel in Columbia City. And now we are going to the next level. Now we have a population of squirrels. So they're all the same species, they're all living in the same area, and they're all competing for food, shelter, and mates. That's a population. The next level of organization is called a community, and it's made up of all the species that live and interact in that area. So a community is made up of not just the population of squirrels, but the population of squirrels and the population of birds and the population of worms, etc., etc. They're all living in one block in Columbia City, Indiana, for example. That's a community. The species in a community depend on each other for many things, shelter and food. Just like the members of a population, the organisms in a community also compete for resources with one another. Okay, and then your next level of organization in the environment is an ecosystem, and that is a community of organisms and their non-living environment. So we're saying all the living and non-living things in an environment are called an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, energy and other resources are exchanged between organisms and the environment. So they're passing energy, passing matter between one another. So that means some things are being eaten and some are doing the eating. Home sweet home. What determines where a population can actually live? Organisms that live in the same area play different roles to get the resources they need to survive. So ecologists use the terms habitat and niche, or niche, to describe where an organism lives and its role in the environment. So a habitat is a place where an organism usually lives. Okay, so the habitat of a squirrel is usually a tree, correct? And in the Midwest, abiotic factors such as temperature often determine whether a species can live in a certain place. So if this species of squirrels cannot handle cold weather, well then they won't survive around here. They'll have to find a different place to live, or their species will not survive. Biotic factors, such as the other organisms that live in the area, also determine whether a species can survive. So maybe there is an excessive amount of predators to that squirrel in an area. Well, that species is not going to survive, so they're going to either have to move or die, and their species won't survive if they stay. Perhaps food is another biotic factor that determines if a species can stay in a place or not. So if there's not enough food around, then that species also cannot survive. So there has to be certain biotic and abiotic factors to determine the habitat and whether it's successful or not for a living thing. Now, a population's niche is different than its habitat. Its niche is its role that it plays in the ecosystem, such as maybe how it gets its food or how it interacts with other populations. So think of a habitat as a home, place where it lives, and a niche is kind of its job. So you probably have a niche, something that you're really good at. Maybe a squirrel's niche is that it's really good at gathering food. And so it plays an important role in its ecosystem with that niche. So a niche is its role, kind of like its job, and its habitat is where it lives. In general, two populations cannot occupy the exact same niche. So if two different populations of squirrels are really good gatherers, well, there's going to be a problem, right? Because if they're both good at gathering the nuts, then neither one are going to have enough to survive, because one group is going to have half and the other population will have half, which is not enough for either to survive. So they can't occupy the exact same niche. They can't have that same specialized role in the population, in the ecosystem. Small difference in habitats, roles, and adaptations can allow similar species to live together in the same ecosystem. So maybe the two squirrels would adapt in some way to change their niche just slightly, then both could survive in the same ecosystem. Maybe one group of squirrels is really good at gathering a certain type of nuts, and the other group of squirrels is really good at gathering a different type of nut or seed or something of that nature. Then both can occupy the same ecosystem and still have enough food and both survive. Something in your book that shows this is the lizard invasion. There's a habitat of South Florida's green anoles that was invaded by a similar lizard called the brown anole. So the green anole was there in South Florida and the brown anole moved in. And the lizards avoid occupying the same habitat by the way they share a tree. So green anoles move to the higher branches and the brown anoles occupy the lower ground branches. But the competition does exist between the anoles. Brown anoles actually eat the young of the green anoles. So the green anoles really need to stay up higher in the tree to avoid the brown anoles and their young being eaten. Interesting competition there, and also interesting specialization. So their niche is whatever exists in the higher branches for the green anoles, and the niche of the brown anoles is whatever exists in the ground branches. Okay, so for an extension, this is not homework, but it would be good if you would read over pages 288 to 292, and here are some numbers that I have picked out that would especially help you extend your understanding. Come to class with some good questions on your visa, numbers 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 12. Remember, you do need to do a visa. Do it properly, spend the time on it, make sure you get a signature, and have it ready for class.